Right, you lot. Chopper John here, and I want to talk about something. I normally don't talk about stuff like this because it's never been relevant, but as we've seen over the past few months and years, I figure that it's time to share a story with you all, right? I used to be a Christian, right? I always was, but in my late teen years, I started taking it more seriously. I viewed myself as the defender of it, somebody that would be its best defender one day, you know? And I was watching videos on YouTube, and I was encouraged to study the Bible, to study the context, and I wanted to do so. I was generally 19 at the time, 18 to 19 at the time. I wanted to study the Bible so that if people quoted it out of context, I would know it and be able to show that you made a mistake. Well, as soon as I started reading in context, I felt really uncomfortable. At first, I was confused about what the servant having an all installed in its ear meant. Of course, that's thanks to the translation using the word servant. But then it became quite clear that it was about slavery. I prayed to God that it was a mistranslation of the Hebrew word or something. That's what I did. I did it because I was better than the Christian God, and I wanted the Christian God to be better. I was uncomfortable with reading accounts about the genocide. I prayed for context, wisdom, and discernment. I felt uncomfortable when God sends a lying spirit in the mouths of prophets. If people are going to do that on their own, as Israel was, you don't need to do anything. But the fact that God does something, gets involved, and sends a lying spirit, it's like I prayed for wisdom and guidance, and tell me if it's a mistranslation of the Hebrew word. I was doing that over the course of many months. I even lied in my bed for a while, you know, just to hear, like 30 minutes. But I always blamed myself for not hearing anything from him. Eventually, I started to read Isaiah, and that book was the big pebble, big sack of bricks thrown at my face. Because what it said, I couldn't reconcile it. I will show you it. This. I couldn't reconcile this with Jesus. And there's more to it than just this. It even talks about his name being like Governor of Peace. I've even recently read the Old Testament in its entirety. And yeah, I can definitely say for sure that if I were a Jew, I wouldn't believe that Jesus Christ was the Son of God. And I've even, I brought it up respectively with my family. I didn't say I don't believe in the religion and that the religion's rubbish. I never did. I just sat them down as like, well, if I were a Jew, I can't really, if I've read the Old Testament recently and I can say that if I were a Jew, I wouldn't believe that Jesus was the Son of God. And they started being like, well, I would blame them. I would. And started trying to tell me that you're too focused on the Old Testament. We don't do things that way anymore. And want to know the fucked up thing? The last part is they were telling me as you read the New Testament, you will start to feel what it's like. You will get the feeling that you know is true. So in the end, it doesn't come back to, oh, I believe religion because it's true. No, it comes back to, I believe it because of my emotions. It all comes back to it. And to know that apologists like Tarek, Kokol, Wallace, Craig, all of them trying to harmonize the Bible, to make it consistent message when it's not, to release a book called Tactics so that they can make money. Really, that's what it is. You're robbing people blind. You're robbing people's minds blind so that you have more money to yourself. Maybe just the attention. Who knows? But regardless, you are contributing to the worsening of the Western world's ability to critically think. You all are. And you street apologists that go round talking to people, using all your tactics to not answer people but make other people answer things when they're not the experts in the field that you trying to ask them about. Fuck you all. And the religious and the war that's going on in Israel and Gaza, it's just horrible. It's a religious war. See, the reason the Jews were given a home by the West was because Christianity and Judaism both needed a end times judgment to come true. They both wanted the same, well, not the same, exact same thing, but they both needed Israel and the Jews to exist where they are. I won't say every religious leader did so because of that reason. I'm sure that a lot of them had compassion in their hearts. You know, I don't blame them. You know, the Jews do deserve their home. You know, they do. It's just that it doesn't seem that, you know, that it doesn't seem that the land can be shared. You know, two-state solution really is the best one. Both Palestinians and Israelis existing alongside each other. I don't want anyone kicked out. I don't want anyone killed. I want both to exist together. As people would say, you know, a lion with a lamb, even though the actual quote that comes from is a wolf and a lamb, because the whole thing's talking about Mount Zion being the land of peace. But, you know, I want peace. But this religious apologetic word game, all this defending, is doing nothing but enabling this religious war. Been fought throughout history, and it's still now. Non-believers are demonized everywhere. And my family were like, well, you gotta believe, son, you gotta believe. It's like you can't just not believe. You apologists, you have fucked up people's minds that they cannot even conceive of what it's like to not believe. All your little atheists just want to be their own gods. All of you should be ashamed of yourselves, one by one. As America does, so will the rest of the world. England, get your shit together whilst you still can. Because as America is, so will you be. I hope I've made some sort of coherent sense, because I don't normally talk about this, but I feel that it needs to be talked about. Because the longer that people don't tell their stories, the longer that people just keep sitting at the sidelines, the more we're going to be enabling this war. Literal religious war, religious crusade, but the other is a war against the mind. Critical thinking. You apologists have done so much to ruin that domain. You've taken away people's ability to critically think. You religious schools have done it. The longer that this is enabled, you know, I still want religion to exist. People want hope after they die. That's understandable. I don't want to take their hope away from them. What I want to take away is their tendency to demonize non-believers, their tendency to teach people not to critically think, you know, to teach their people that two different testaments, essentially contradictory ones, are one and the same. They all harmonize. Well, if they harmonize, you should be able to link the two together. I even suggested as much to my family. Like, well, you can't do that. You know, just read the New Testament. When you teach people bullshit like that, it makes them susceptible to other kinds of bullshit, as long as it just conforms to what they already believe. You have done this. Shame on you all. Shame on you all. You don't even take your theology apart to know that, well, even if God didn't know everything, God throwing the devil down to earth with Adam and Eve was a horrible decision, even for a being that didn't know everything. But for a being that knew everything, it's just horrible. He just wants theatrics, is all. Even a God that didn't know everything should have known better than that. If a human did the equivalent, we would blame that human being. But we don't blame this God for doing it because he's beyond reproach. You have taught people that it is okay to not put the blame where it deserves. You have taught people that. Shame on you. Shame on you. I think I've already said, I hope it made some sense. So I don't normally talk about this, but as long as it's not talked about, as long as people don't come out with their stories, as long as they don't, non-believers and the world at large will remain a mess. This is an emergency to teach critical thinking skills. Something that survives poor, being poor, something that survives being ignorant of history. What we need is critical thinking. You don't need to know all the maths. You don't need to know all the history. You don't need to know all the science. You just need to know how to think. As long as you don't know how to do that, you're fucked. Hope you liked this video and have a better day, more or less. See you all later.